What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff, and I'm here to give you guys a little bit more insight into how you can be a successful musician. So, this evening's topic is dating and relationships. And so, essentially, we're going to talk about how a musician should kind of look at dating and how they typically handle dating and what the best, I guess you would say, approaches to it could be. So, if you're interested in conversations like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. So, let's first get into like, is it even important to do that? Like, why is this even a conversation, right? Because if you were looking at any other industry, like, a doctor or a lawyer or a basic level, like just, your regular job, it really wouldn't matter who you're dating or that you're dating at all, right? Until you get to like a certain level where, your whole personal life is in a microscope. But in general, most jobs don't really care who you're dating, right? So what makes it different for a musician? Well, it makes it unique in the way that most relationships are unique to a particular industry. So let's say, for example, you were a police officer. A police officer, their spouse has to deal with the lifestyle of a police officer. Same with a firefighter. If you were in the military, if you were a pastor, these different lifestyles that come with these occupations affect your family and whoever you're dating, right? And so when you're a young musician and you're looking for a date or a spouse, whatever it is, depending on your lifestyle, how important is this to your career? Because we just got done saying that it doesn't really matter if you were, doing a regular job, but it kind of matters if you were doing like a policeman's job or if you were a politician or a pastor, right? So if we would agree that there are some occupations where it does matter how you shape your relationships and things like that, I would say that being a musician is one of them at a certain point. So what do I mean? There's going to be a point in your life where you may be expected to do something for the industry that may have very little to do with your personal beliefs or even like your personal situation. You may be actually like going through something at the time, but we need you to come and perform your music. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean something crazy. Like it doesn't have to be like performing for someone you don't like or things like that. It could just be something as simple as having a show on Christmas Eve, something like that. Like that can be stressful. Um, that can be a problematic, especially if you have something that could be competing for that time or for that real estate of your attention, right? And so Christmas Eve being a gig could mean a lot of money for you, could mean great opportunities, maybe great networking. But if it's something that's maybe intimate to your family or maybe whoever you're dating, then this can be an issue. Having a gig on Valentine's Day, having a gig on maybe their birthday, your anniversary, these are all different things. Now, this can be handled differently depending on what level you're on. So, like I said before, if you were in like a regular 9 to 5, then when you clock out, then you have all the time in the world to spend with them. But it's a little different if you're a doctor or a surgeon where you're on call, right? Or if you're a musician and pretty much the next 3 days you're out of town and you have to pretty much perform and travel and then also debrief an entire business before you get back home and be able to, relax. So that's something you have to think about when you're considering dating and things like that. So now that we've gotten that part out of the way, the next part we should really consider is like who are the type of people that this would work for, right? And so when I say there's like certain levels to it, that's kind of what I mean. Like it's not necessarily that there's like record sales or some kind of amount of money or things like that. It just comes down to lifestyle. So lifestyle and I would say culture. So what I mean by that is you could have a girlfriend who prefers to spend a lot of time around you, or you could have a girlfriend who's really involved in terms of like your life and things like that. So if you're a musician with that kind of situation, you have to think about that in terms of Well, if I have to travel, how would this work? If we have children, how would this work? If we get married, how would this work? Right. And you kind of have to answer those questions beforehand because you don't want it to be an issue, the week of the biggest gig of your life. You want this to kind of to kind of be an easy decision to make, right? Now, usually when you're dealing with the common musician, meaning like those of us who may, we go to Miss Jones's piano class in elementary school, and then we may have learned violin in high school, and then we went to college and maybe joined jazz band and things like that's the typical common story or trail for the music student, right? On the other hand of that, you could just be somebody who maybe just was around music was around your family, and you picked up an instrument or started singing and it just became, part of your thing, right? But in both of those situations, when the topic of dating comes up, it's usually surrounding the average talking points around dating, which is, who to date, why you should date, and all that other junk, right? So it's going to be difficult for many young musicians to be able to understand the pitfalls or obstacles that may be forthcoming, which may be coming down the road for them, because there is no specific conversation for musicians. There's always the salacious ones about breakups and divorces and people losing houses and stuff, but just explaining how it works for the common musician, it's rarely had on camera, or at least from, an experienced perspective. And so, again, when we're discussing what kinds of people this would really work for, these are usually people where they're intimately connected, meaning they understand each other to a point to where it's not resentful and regretful. So, what do I mean by that? That means that if you're in a relationship with like a pop star, and this pop star has a lot of, attention on them and things like that, there's going to be times where that attention may kind of interfere or maybe distract from the intimate and personal attention you may crave from the person you're dating, right? And it can go both ways. Like, you may want to spend a whole bunch of time with your girlfriend, but you have to work and you have to, be in the studio. Or maybe on the other side of it, if you flip it again, she wants to spend a lot of time with you, but you have to work. And so figuring out how this person can be interwoven into the lifestyle you have is going to be key. Now, how would that work? What is the ideal situation for that? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and it's basically shown through examples of musicians today. And one version of it could be where you and, let's say, your girlfriend or boyfriend, they're involved in the business process. They may not be a lawyer or an accountant, but maybe they are a part of how your day goes. Maybe they set up the morning for you or the routine, or maybe they assist you in, delivering information. And that can look like an assistant, that can look like, a secretary or something like that. You can actually put them in the business if you really, really want to. But that can be helpful for a person who wants to be around, wants to be a part of the situation, and really likes the lifestyle and enjoys everything that comes with it. On the other hand, there could be a situation which could ideally work if your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever doesn't like the spotlight, doesn't like the lifestyle of a musician and an artist that has to, travel a lot, maybe doing gigs and shake hands and, stand next to each other for pictures and stuff like that for whatever reason. Maybe they don't like that. So what you could do is you could allot time, meaning sort out time for them, or try to find ways where the result is a part of their lifestyle. Now, what do I mean by that? That means that if you have a big gig coming up, or maybe a rehearsal that you have to go to, it can be fun for some people to know what comes of that, to kind of see, to hear about the process, to kind of know that you're working on an album, or maybe you're working with really cool musicians, and hear different clips and audio and background clips and things like that. Some people enjoy that. And then on the other hand, if again they just really want nothing to do with your music lifestyle, then you may have to deal with whatever they're into as a priority, which may not be fun. But it really depends on how you want to look at your relationship, because some people, they use music as a more personal outlet and not necessarily something that's a business. And that's what I mean by levels as far as where your career is. So let's explore that a little bit more. So when we're talking about levels of a musician, there are people who are in bands today, maybe five, six, 7 piece bands. They have a studio they rehearse with. They have a logo. They have a equipment van. They have everything, but they rehearse out of mom's basement. Okay, and so for them, you can have 4 or 5 people in that band, married, dating people, and all that, and most of their audience wouldn't care, wouldn't matter at all, simply because it just doesn't affect the music, doesn't affect the process, and it doesn't really hinder the process either, right? Unless, of course, something extreme happens, but for the most part, most people don't care that your drummer is dating someone or that your singer is married or something like that, right? And so that's one level. Another level, which isn't necessarily higher or lower for a musician, it's just different. I would say lane, then let's call them lanes. A different lane would be you have a more, I guess you could say, socialite music career, where who you do songs with matters, where who you take photos with really matters to your audience, how you look on stage matters, what you say in interviews matters a lot to your fans and things like that. So that is a situation where you want to find someone who kind of understands that and can fit into that puzzle piece, and then also enhance it, because at the same time, you don't want them to have to struggle with the same problems. You want them to be able to improve upon what's happening. And that's what I mean by, there are different ideal situations when it comes to dating as a musician, but there has to be an understanding of what level you want as a musician, and then how that's going to affect the people around you. And so, going back to my personal experiences, I've seen people try to fit really normal people, like really just like, I just want to just get up and go to work, go to sleep people, into the socialite style or lifestyle for them. And it would never really work, simply because the person would either try to participate and burn out, meaning they would try to, come to the parties, come to the shows, and then they realize, I'm not really cut out for this. And it just kind of starts to tear into maybe how they feel about the person or feel about the lifestyle. Like, I don't think I'm cut for the lifestyle, so maybe I'm not cut for you, right? And then I've seen the other version of it, where some people weren't moving fast enough for the person they're dating as far as potential. So they may have felt like, I see that you're a talented artist or a singer, but the moves you're making aren't clicking for what I think you should be doing. And that can be a problem, because they're not on the same page as far as understanding what steps they need to take for progress. There's criticism, but not really application. There's a lot of, I guess you could say, dissonance, meaning they don't really connect as partners, but there's a lot of time spent. So there's more resentment each day, each night, and each, performance they do. And so this is why I'm trying to have this conversation from the perspective of a musician, because this kind of makes sense for most people if you look at it from dating with a purpose. But when you're looking at most musicians, dating is not really a thing that they look at as affecting their personal career. They look at it as affecting their love life or just their emotions. And it really does affect your career. And I've seen it, we've seen it, you've all seen it. We actually make money off of it happening when people break up or they do get into relationships. It is a part of the industry. So now that we know that and we understand that, we can make better decisions. So if this was a fun conversation, let me know. And I'll have more conversations like this with you guys all the time. And I want you guys to make sure you let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced something like this in your music career, and let me know how it really affected the music side of your life. And so, like I said, I'm having more conversations like this with you guys every night. I will see you guys out. Peace.